Rajiv Menon is an entrepreneur, speaker, and mentor. He is founder of Informulate, a software and innovation consultancy that employs lean startup and agile methodologies, launched in 2006. He launched talentforstartups.org, a free nonprofit portal for startup founders to collaborate with students and professionals in 2014. He is also the organizer for Lean Startup Orlando and Startup Weekend Orlando. I'm sensing a theme here.
Yes.
He mentors local accelerators, notably Venture Scale Up and Central Florida Social Enterprise Accelerator, also known as Rally. He is the chair-elect of the Orlando Tech Council under the Orlando Economic Partnership.
Cool. Thank you so much. No, it's great. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate that. Thank you all for joining. I'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome to our workshop. We're going to be talking about digital transformation, specifically customer discovery. And I put this talk together not really to talk about technology as much, but to understand how technology can create value. At the end of the day, it's not tech, but value that is rewarded, right? There's a lot of people that can write code, but not everybody who writes code ends up creating the next unicorn. Value is created through understanding the customer's needs and having the skills to fulfill those needs, right? So if you can do this, if you can find that core value that customers really want, then customers will pay you, VCs will fund you, and larger enterprises will come and try to acquire you. So one of the key questions I really wanted to answer for us in this talk is, well, this is a participation question, I guess. What's the difference between a small business and a startup? Anybody wants to take a guess at that? Cash flow, okay. Any others?
What else is rare that you would have a startup immediately with 100 employees and lots of money?
Right.
It is a startup.
Yep. Right, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between a startup and a small business. I think one of the biggest differences that we see is the startup is designed to scale. So a startup, you qualify something as a startup which has the potential to scale a lot faster. And you've seen these companies that go from 10 users one day in the launch and then go to 1 million users. And those are the numbers that you see, the big up and to the right kind of graphs, right? Whereas a small business is not really built with that ambition in mind. It's not built from that way. It's more of a lifestyle business. So my talk today is really going to be about why is that difference there? Why is that ambition not there for small businesses? And part of it is, are they not thinking in terms of digital? Because digital is what allows you to really scale. And when you have digital transformation applied to a small business, can we get closer and can we actually start thinking like a startup? All right. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about why we're here. We're going to talk about the problem statement of what's holding us back. We're going to talk about digital transformation, what you have that can bring you closer to a startup, the methodologies that are actually out there and proven that actually all the startups in Silicon Valley use today. One of them is Lean Startup, types of learning that you need to understand your customer value creation better, customer discovery, and then we have a live exercise for customer discovery and what investors want. So how do we get ready to present ourselves more startup-y, right? So Amy was kind enough to go through the introductions. I'm not going to go through that again. Suffice to say that I'm the founder and CEO at Informulate. We're a software consulting company as well as innovation consulting. I'm also the chair of the Orlando Tech Council and I mentor startups for a living. Well, not for a living. I do that for fun, actually. I do the software for a living. So why are you here? Well, I think some of you know that disruption is coming. It's pretty obvious at this point that there's a lot of disruption that is coming up and it's mostly driven by tech. And one of the lines that was said almost 15, 20 years ago by Mark Andreessen is that software is eating the world. What that means is every single business has to have a software component, and the companies that are software or digital natives have a big advantage because they're already thinking in terms of software. They're not coming and thinking about the vertical and the business and all of that, which they have to, of course, but they're thinking about how can this software really scale and how can it disrupt the entire industry. And that makes a big difference, just the mindset shift there. Just as a factoid here for you, the S&P 500 lifespan of a company that came on the S&P, how long does it stay on the S&P, was 61 years in 1958. Today it is 18 years. So the time that you spend there once you make it is much, much shorter than it used to be, which means what? It means that new entrants, new companies with ideas can push those companies that already have established themselves out of the way pretty fast if you have the right technology and if you have the right customer market fit. So 30% of small, medium enterprises are expected to shut down, especially because of the pandemic right now. And that is the rate of disruption we're talking about. So it's not just the top, it's the bottom as well. So the disruption is happening in all directions. The four horsemen of tech, which are kind of eating up everything there is, like the media conglomerate that is Netflix and Amazon, Facebook, Google, they're eating everybody's lunch. And part of it is for us to know what are they doing right, and if you can't beat them, join them, right? Part of it is how do you as a small business, what do you have to offer that makes you either a competitor / acquisition target that then is on the roadmap for some of these large companies to maybe buy you out. And why is that a good thing? Well, let me ask a question again. Anybody know what was the year for the highest VC funding ever?
2006.
Good guess, okay. Any other guesses? 2006 is one guess? Nope, all right. You would also, probably some people might have guessed the dot-com boom, right? Of 99, 2000. If you add up 99 and 2000, there was $148 billion with a B that was invested by VCs, just VCs, not banks and other people, not loans, just VC funding. 148 million. Last year, 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we crossed 150 billion. That's the highest amount of funding that has ever gone into VC funding, from VC funding ever. Now, that's a crazy number, right? Why is there so much funding? Because the pandemic really shifted focus on software. All the tech companies have been doing fantastic during the pandemic. And part of it is because they can scale without having to have that manual touch and manual interaction. You can go do stuff on the web, on the internet, virtual remote meetings and all of that stuff. So if you divvy that up between 30,000 businesses, $150 billion, if you divvy that up across 30,000 businesses, that would still be $5 million invested per business. So think about that. What would you do if you were one of those that received $5 million in funding? How could you create a business that was scalable, that was attractive for acquisition? All right. And part of it, let me go back a slide here, is we want to move the ambition from, oh, I should get to tech at some point, or I want to get to tech at some point, really need to, I get to go to tech right now. And I'll tell you the reasons why there's no time like the present. There's more. So part of it, the advantages that small businesses have is you're small, you're nimble, you can change direction, you don't have to be stuck with a lot of baggage from the past. You can make changes very quickly and react to the market. The other thing is scale. This was a big advantage for big companies, right? Which is why, 50, 60 years ago, S&P companies stuck around for a long time, was because they had the advantage of scale. It was hard to compete with them. But with software, especially the way the software is today, you don't need a lot of infrastructure to scale. You can use Amazon. You can scale as people come in. So as more people come in, they're paying you more, you just scale automatically. You don't have to worry about all this infrastructure. You also don't have to worry a lot about development. There's a lot of low-code, no-code things, which is the democratization of tech that I have as the last point, where there's a whole generation. I'm sure everybody's heard the story of the Silicon Valley teenager who created this app and now has hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. And you're like, okay, yeah, that guy is a genius, and they did it because they know tech really well and they were born into it. That's also changing. There are teenagers in Silicon Valley still getting those big exits and creating those apps without knowing a line of code. That's the big difference now. In 2021, there's ways for you to, I was just talking to somebody from the SBDC yesterday, and his son has an idea for an app. He's using bubble.io, which is a low-code, no-code solution. We just drag and drop things, and you can create your own app. So you don't even need developers. You don't need a team. You can compete. The main thing here is I want us all to be thinking about customer value. That's the core thing. If you get customer value, everything else falls in place. All right. The other thing is integrated markets, because you had to go sell all this stuff. One thing is building it, then you got to sell it, right? So if you have an integrated market, which is what we have with Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn and other sources, right? You could put your ad in there that competes just as well against Amazon or any of the big heavyweights, because it's pay per click. It's $10, $5, $2 a click. And if your product is good and you found that product market fit with the value that you're looking for, then people are going to click on that ad and you're going to get the revenue that you were hoping for. So those are some of the big game changers here that people in Silicon Valley know and understand, and those teenage founders that I talked about, that we need to embody as well. All right, so let's talk really quick about digital transformation. Now, the technical definition that I picked up online was the use of digital tech to transform services or businesses, right? That's the enterprise lingo, because digital transformation is a phrase that generally applies to the enterprise. But you can just as easily refer to internal operations, and that's really where we have to, like as small businesses, we have to have a mindset shift. For small businesses, it's different. You don't really have that much of a problem with internal operations because you have a few people and you're not going to automate all of the workflows because you have, a handful of employees. What you really have to focus on is external operations, which is how are you serving your customers? Can you scale that out, even with a small group of people? For example, WhatsApp, when it exited for hundreds of millions of dollars or billions, I don't remember the exact number now, they had like a dozen employees. That was their team. And that is possible if you found that customer market fit. The real opportunity there is to reach the customer. And that's what makes the difference between digital natives and digital immigrants. So take what you've got, make it digital, bring it in front of your customer, and that's where the magic happens. So what other assets do you have? Let's leverage what you have. You have your customers. You're a small business. You have existing customers. You have your experience in your vertical. You've been in that vertical for years. You understand how things work in that vertical. You have a network of personal relationships and other things that you have with vendors, with suppliers and all of that. You have a team of people that you can pull to deliver the value that you're looking for. And most importantly, you've got that entrepreneurial DNA, right? That's what you have to bring to the table. And you already have it today. If you're a small business owner or leader in any way, you have that already. What is missing in this picture? Innovation methodology, right? So this used to be something that only the expert people, really like multi-exit kind of people knew about innovation methodology. But in the last 15 years or so, it has completely changed. This is now taught in MBA schools where they don't teach you to write those long business plans and go through all of that process and just make everything up anyway. It is much more fast-paced than that, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is an introduction to innovation methodology. All right, and there's 3 that I want to point out, and you can, by the way, you can pull these slides online. And we're also going to be, if you want to give your cards or anything to my assistant there, Ashley, she can send you the slides, and we're also giving you the recording if you want. So there's 3 main ones that we're going to talk about: design thinking, lean startup, and agile. And of course, it's not in our scope to really go through every single methodology in detail. So I'll just give you a quick reason about why you should care about each one. Design thinking is about creating customer empathy, really getting into their shoes and understanding how they think, because that is where you extract their pain points. And then you figure out what you're going to do to solve those pain points. And we're going to do an exercise today, which is going to be, which is going to apply some of those principles. Lean startup is about experimentation. You're going to have to do something before you decide to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars into something. You want to know that the money you're going to put in before you spend it is going to be worth it. And that's where these experiments come in. You can do experiments for $0 right now. And we're also going to do an exercise on that today. You can do experiments for $0. You can bump it up with some ads. You can spend $10 or $20 all the way up to $5,000, whatever. The process is going to be about adding more money into your experiment as you get validation from your previous experiments. So keep building it bigger and bigger, so you're not going to try to say, oh, I can't do this because I don't have $150,000. No, you can start right now with $0. Now, agile methodology is about execution, the speed of execution. How quickly can you take an idea within, and Silicon Valley companies do this all the time. They're called agile sprints, usually 1 week, sometimes 2 weeks, and they deliver value within that really short period of time. You talk to the customer, figure out what they want, you bring it down to specification level, deliver the value, get feedback, go back immediately to the next cycle, and keep going. So you can Google those and you can find out more detail about that. This is one of my Bibles, the Lean Startup book. And again, we can get you a copy of this if you reach out to Ashley. This is really what kickstarted the whole innovation methodology movement in my mind, because once this book came out and became New York Times bestseller, there was a whole lot of authors and leaders who really came together around this book to bring other tools and resources to bear. So it's a methodology for innovation that focuses on the highest risk and value, because you don't want to start your experiment when you're doing that, minimal cost experiment. You might have 20 different risks that could affect your idea or your business. You don't want to start with number 20. You want to start with number 1. What is your highest risk? And then work from there. And then you want to make data-driven decisions. Each phase you're going to work on is going to be based on the data from the previous phase. And you want to speed up that value creation. And the biggest thing that affects people, any founder, any creator, and it's great that you're trying to create and you're leading, right? But the biggest thing that affects you is also your own bias. And that's what also limits people, because like, maybe I'm not on the right track, or maybe you're overconfident and you're like, yeah, I'm going to put $100,000 into this, but you haven't really validated. Either way, it's a bad thing, right? Let the market speak to you. That's what we're going to learn today. And then you want to unlock the creativity and empower your teams, because this is not a solo endeavor. You want to have people around you that can support you, and I'm sure there's a lot of resources from the Jim Moran Institute as well as from the SBDC that can help you provide that, be that voice of reason to role play some of those scenarios with you. All right, so there's a lot of concepts here. We don't really have time to go into all of them, but there's the leap of faith assumption, which is the make or break assumption that you really have to validate as early as possible before you move forward. Then the concept of designing those experiments is key. Getting out of the building, right? Don't just sit there and think about all the things you could do, but get out of the building and actually talk to customers. The minimum viable product is the first offering that you put in front of a customer that they react to. And then I think we talked about Agile. Build, measure, learn is the process, is the ongoing loop that you do. It's the iteration. Build something, measure what people are doing with it, learn from it, go back and build something. All right. There are plenty of tools available. These are a few of my favorite tools. The persona canvas helps you understand and create a persona specifically around who your customer segment is, what they like, what they don't like, who they are, their demographic information, what kind of pain points they have. The business model canvas is actually a one-pager. So nobody at this day and age should be thinking about a business and the first thing they do is write a business plan. That is not what happens in 2021. Even if they're telling you that in the SBDC, I would say, hold on just a second. Don't start writing 30, 40 pages. Write one page, which is the business model canvas. That's where you should start if you have an idea. And you don't even need to fill all the segments within that canvas. We don't have time to go into the details in the canvas, but there's a few that are very important, which is the value proposition canvas, which is your number one thing that you would do. If you have an idea, start with the value proposition canvas. That actually talks about the pains and gains for your customer segment and how you're going to solve for those pains and gains. The experimentation board is a great tool as well, which I like a lot, is what experiment should you use at what stage, right? And we'll talk about that today. The Kanban board is a simple way. It's an agile tool that allows you to know where you are in the process, because when you have a lot of things, and especially as a founder or a leader, you know this. It's not just, you don't have just one task a day. You have 24 tasks a day, and then while you're doing task number 3, you have another 7 tasks added to your plate. So how do you keep that stuff organized? You can use something like a Kanban board. So it's called a backlog of things that you need to do, what you're working on right now, and then what is done. So you really have to be active about how you manage your time and go forward with that. So this slide is really more here to show you that there's a lot possible. I'm definitely not going to read every one of those on the list there, but there are a lot of experiments, very creative things that people have actually worked on and developed that we're summarizing on this slide. And you can Google all of these as well to know how to do those experiments, right? So for example, the Wizard of Oz, as the name suggests, there's nothing behind the curtain, right? You're talking to people and saying, hey, I have an AI solution that is going to solve your travel needs. And you ask a chatbot and it's going to answer everything that you need. Well, you don't need to build it out on day one, because AI solutions are going to be very, very expensive to build. You can just have a real human, a native human, not an artificial human, right? Actually answering those questions. And if people start liking your service and you're getting the results that you want, sure, let's go and automate it later, right? So those are the kinds of experiments where you can spend close to $0 to actually test those out. And there's a lot of them like that. Are you testing out your marketing? You can do a landing page. You can put an ad over there and see, because that's your front door. If people aren't clicking on your ads, then there's really no point building the service if they don't even care about what you're selling them. So work on the messaging there. And there's really 2 main hypotheses, if you were to look at it from an innovation methodology perspective, that really matter. One of them is the value hypothesis, which is, are you delivering value to the customer based on what you said you were going to do? And two is the scaling hypothesis, which is, how are you getting to them? What messages are you using? Are you depending on, for example, you think that this is a problem, you put it out there as a message, hey, solving all your travel problems, click here, right? And if people don't have travel problems, well, that's a big hypothesis that may be wrong if you put a few dollars behind an ad, send them to this landing page, nobody's clicking on it, nobody's converting, then you know that that's really, you should be either changing your pitch or that the problem doesn't exist. And that there's a process for going through that between the quantitative and qualitative that I'll get to in a minute. But there's ways to test both. There's ways to test your value and there's ways to test your pitch. There's experiments that can do all of those. All right, I will move forward. So, we have the tools. You got your idea down on your canvas. You've got some experiments that you can do. You have to repeat it. It's not a one-time thing that you did this test, now we're done, let's go get $100,000. Make sure you go through that process in a gradual way of increasing the amount of money and investment that you're putting into it. It's a collective exercise. Make sure you're bringing your team to the conversation, because again, personal biases do come in and you want to eliminate that. And then every single thing you put on the business model is a hypothesis. Is the pitch a problem? Is the value a problem? Is the partnerships a problem? Is your supply chain a problem? Anything that you see in the key resources there, or anything in the key partners or the cost structure, all of those can be experimented on. And that's how we really find what actually works. And the speed of which you do this is the most important thing. The reason why a lot of small businesses don't scale is because they might try an experiment or two, which I'm sure everybody has, but they don't keep at it. They don't keep the discipline of going back and doing the rinse and repeat. All right, so this is one of my favorite books as well, which covers the experiments in a lot more detail. We can get you this book as well if you message Ashley. It was co-authored by a friend of mine, Tristan Cromer, who actually spoke at one of my meetups that I run here called Lean Startup Orlando. You guys are invited to that. It's a free meetup online, Lean Startup Orlando. Go to meetup.com and find us there. We have a talk coming up this month, which is about diversity and inclusion in innovation. And we have talks every month from experts in the field. So this book was written by Tristan Cromer, who spoke at that group, and he actually co-authored with this book with a number of real-world innovation leaders. So it's not written by one person, it's written by multiple experts who've contributed to this book. There's 4 phases, and as you look, there's quadrants here. So there's the market and the product, the generative research, and the evaluative experiment. So this is your roadmap of how you approach the problem. It's a four-step process, right? The first phase is validation, the qualitative market. So there's 2 kinds of experiments that we talk about. One is qualitative, which is it's open-ended. It's not giving you a number. It's giving you a feeling. It's opening up avenues of conversation. It's about thinking about the problem in different ways. And that includes customer discovery, which is what we're going to do today. Phase 2, once you have some validation there, then you can go quantitative a little bit. And you can test things out with like a landing page, a pre-sales page, a video. There's a lot of experiments we talked about. And then phase 3, you want to test out the product. Like, hey, we validated that the problem exists. Now let's put something in front of them and have them respond in a qualitative way to how that product is working for them. And then finally, it's the quantitative product. Like, let's get a full-fledged product out there and let's look at analytics, let's look at usability and all of those things and start polishing it from that perspective, right? So there's 2 main things you want to learn about. What are the 2 main things? One is your market, which is your customer. Do you really understand what the customer is thinking, their pain points and their problem statements, right? And then the product is your solution. What are you offering? So you want to start with the customer, understand their pain points, then think about how you're going to solve it, right? So that's the phases that I just described. And then you want to start with the qualitative, which is the open-ended stuff. And then move to the quantitative, which is the very specific metrics-driven things that they do. Like they either click on your link or they don't. You can count how many people you sent to the page. You can count how many people clicked on the link. You can count how many people actually became customers. So that's where it gets quantitative. So you start with the customer, you start qualitative, you end quantitative. All right, so that's what we just talked about. The types of questions you would ask for qualitative are open-ended questions. How is this working for you? Why isn't it working for you? why do you want something else, why not this, those kinds of questions. And then quantitative is close-ended, very specific. How much would you pay for this? Here's a number, and how many people actually convert when you put that number in there? What are they clicking on? What are they not clicking on? Those are the quantitative type questions. All right, and when you do that, what are you doing? It's all about learning, the speed of learning. And the product market fit is what you're trying to learn about. So the market type questions are, who is our customer? What is that segment? What are their pain points? What jobs are they trying to accomplish, and what is holding them back from accomplishing those jobs? How do we find them? What channels do we use? Those are all market related questions. And then the product related questions are, how can we solve this problem, right? We know they have the problem. We validated they have the problem. There's many ways to solve any specific problem. So what you want to see in your head right now is a picture, and I had this in one of my earlier slides, it's not on this one, but you want to see a picture of a little stick figure guy or gal, and that's one customer segment. There's a lot of them, right? There's many different customer segments you could approach. Each stick figure has multiple problems, right? They're trying to accomplish a lot of different jobs, and they have multiple problems of accomplishing those jobs. Each problem within that is again being broken up, and each problem can have multiple solutions. You could solve this with an app. You could solve this with an AI bot. You could solve this through a process change. There's many different ways you can solve that problem. So what we want to do is always start with the customer. Because if you start with a solution, as you work your way back, it's much harder to find somebody that actually wants your product and actually cares enough to pay for that solution, because it might be a real problem. They just don't want to pay for it because it's not a big enough deal for them. So you want to start with the customer, find out their top problem, pick that top problem, find out the best solution. That's the shortest path for you to get to a product market fit. All right. So we are at the point where we're going to do some audience participation. I'm going to ask that everybody pair up, and yeah, I guess you're paired up already. So yeah, there's a pair there. Okay, so the first thing is, when you're doing customer discovery, the idea is we do a few things and we stay away from not doing certain things. Customer discovery is not sales, all right? So customer discovery is about being as open as possible and really listening. So you want to explore the problem with we're going to role play here. One person's going to be the interviewer, one person's going to be the interviewee, and then we'll flip it around, all right? And then we'll actually have another round, so we'll have to have some of you move so that if you have a different partner for the second round, we'll do the same thing again. All right? So we're going to explore the pain points of the particular problem that I'm going to present you with. We're going to empathize and really hear them out on that. You only have 5 minutes per round, so you can't really empathize a whole lot, but you're going to get enough time to get the sense of it. Normally we do half hour to 1 hour. Like if you were actually doing this in the real world, you would do half hour at a minimum. And then you bring the pain. What does that mean? You really want to understand the pain points. You want to talk about their past behaviors. You don't want to ask them questions like, hey, if I had this product, would you buy it? No, because that's a future behavior. And that's something that they would do, may or may not do in the future. It's hard for people to imagine it. And there's a lot of biasing in your questions when you ask those kinds of questions, right? So Steve Jobs has said, it's not the customer's responsibility to tell us what they want, right? It's his or the team's responsibility to figure out what they want to build that'll solve the customer's problems, but you do want to hear what their problems are to make sure that you build the right thing for them, right? So if you ask them solution-based questions, you might be misled, and they're going to tell you what you want to hear, like, yeah, you think this is a good idea? Sure, sounds great. Will you pay for it? Maybe, yeah. And then you go build it, they come back, they're like, yeah, that's really not in our budget right now. So you don't want that to happen. You want to actually validate if the problem is severe enough, then they are paying money for that solution today, and they probably have a poor version of the solution that you could do faster, better, cheaper. That's when you know that you have a product market fit. All right? So ask about what their workarounds are. For this problem, how are you trying to solve it today? And if you can find some estimation of the budget they're spending on solving that problem today, that means it's a serious enough problem that they're trying to figure it out on their own. And if they're trying to figure it out on your own, you come in with a solution that they don't need to figure out on their own, they're going to go with your solution. So that's really what you're looking for. A pain that's really strong and something that they're doing a workaround for. That's your validation, all right, at this stage. And then what you don't want to do is don't sell, right? Don't talk about your idea. Don't talk about, hey, would you use it if, how much would you pay for it, and all that. And would you like it if I did X? Don't talk about future state, and don't interrupt them. Try to let them to finish their thoughts and then move on to the next topic. Okay? Everybody oriented on what the exercise is going to be like? Well, it's just talking, really, right? At the end of the day, we're just talking. So our topic for the day, and we're going to do 5-minute sessions, as I said, and I'll need, Ashley, if you can use your timer to keep the track of the 5 minutes and just let us know when we're done, right? So we'll have 5 minutes, and if you take your pages out, the single pagers that I've put on your desk there, and look at the front of the handout, hey Tomas, can you hand me one of those from the table? I didn't keep a copy for myself. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so if you're looking at this on the front page, page 1, you'll see there's 3 sections there that we need to fill out in the first 5-minute segment. So we have 5 minutes to fill this out. The pains that I think business travelers experience. So you're talking about yourself. I'm sure everybody's traveled, right? You've done business travel, you've gone to conferences, you've gone visiting clients, whatever. List some of the pains. I would say 3 to 5 pains is good enough for now. And then the solution, the way I would imagine solving this problem. And you don't have to limit yourself to just digital for this exercise. I mean, if you go digital, that's great. Extra points for that. But if you don't have a digital idea to solve it, that's fine. Just think of whatever the solution could be, right? And then the gains. Once you have that solution in place, what other value can you create? Because now you have a solution in place, what other things could you do for business travelers that are the secondary things, right, that you want to do for them? All right, I'll flip it around real quick, and you're going to do 2 interviews. So in the first part of the exercise, one of you is going to decide to be the interviewer, and you're going to be asking questions for 5 minutes and taking notes on this section, right? And then when that timer goes off, we're going to flip it around. You're going to be the interviewee. The other person that you're paired up with is going to be the interviewer. You don't need to fill anything up if you're the interviewee. You're just writing things down when you're the interviewer. And then we'll change partners, and we'll move tables, and we'll do that again in the second round. All right? Everybody clear on what we're doing? So far, so good?
For the first one, we're just filling out the top policy.
We're
waiting to do things.
No, we're starting with that page. We're starting with this page first. So it says page 1 on there. That's the first page we're starting with. That's going to be the first 5-minute segment.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do, we're talking about business travel, right? So think about your business travel before we start here. If I can just have everybody's attention for a second while I go through instructions, please. No worries. Is that there are many steps in a business traveler's journey, right? Planning the trip, booking the trip, just to spark your imagination here. The car ride over to the airport, the parking situation at the airport, air travel, food, whatever you want, airline food. All of those things are part of that journey of what you're talking about. You could list pains from any step in the journey. It's totally up to you. Use your creativity, and you can rank them. And you don't need to take every single pain there to your solution. You just need to take one of those pains and create a solution around it. All right. And once you think about the solution, give yourself a minute to add some gains there. All right. So what you're going to do then is you're talking to your interviewee, and you're going to ask them questions to find out if these things are things that they really care about, right? And you got to do that with these instructions. Remember, don't sell, don't bias. Just ask them, hey, what is your experience with business travel? What are the biggest issues that you've faced? And see if they match up, right? That's the exercise is what it's all about, is the things that you came up with, does it match up with what they organically came up with without you biasing them? All right, and see if you can lead them without biasing them too much. Well, what about this step of the journey? What about that step of the journey? How much do you pay for this? How much do you pay for that? So really think about it in those terms to get validation for this solution that you're trying to get to without biasing them. That's the key part. All right? I'll leave this slide up because that's going to be part of your question. So just remind yourself that you're not supposed to bias them. All right, everybody clear? You got your first page up? Go ahead and start. Your time starts now. Pick a section of that journey of the business travel. And Ash, if you can start the timer. Let's list the pains in the different steps. Your time has started now. You have 5 minutes. I think everybody's done there. Perfect. Wow, you guys are good. Perfectly on time. All right, so that was your solo exercise. So keep that in your mind. And as we talked about, keep this in your mind as well, which is you're trying to understand the problem from your interviewee's perspective. And don't push them too hard on your solution idea. What you want to do is, how can you ask questions around that area that will validate it, and ask them about their past behavior and workarounds they've used that validate that your pain point is real. All right? Everybody ready to go with the first part of the conversation? So now we're flipping over to the back, and you're going to be filling in, the interviewers are going to be filling this in. The interviewees are just answering questions, right? So interviewees don't write, interviewers should write, and write down a few points there as you go. And you can make points about pain points, dollars being spent, whatever other notes you think would be valuable there. Ready to go? Any questions on that? Good? All right, Ashley, let me know when the time starts. All right, let's talk. So that's the end of the first round. I walked around, I heard what you guys were talking about. It sounded great. There wasn't that much biasing going on, and I know it's a little bit stressful for the person asking the questions because you might not be hearing what you want to hear. That is exactly the feeling you should have right now. All right, so we're going to switch gears, and we're going to give the other person a chance, and we're going to start our time now. All right, so that was the end of our first round, so everybody had a chance to do an interview and to be interviewed. Anybody want to say something about how divergent their idea was from what they actually encountered? Go ahead.
I really struggled in how I need to think about my problems a lot, because I was like trying to get him to go down the path of marketing,
Yep.
which is totally different. I was like,
Right.
I just have to let go of my inherent thought, which is something I need to pay attention to. Like,
Yeah.
I want to
Exactly.
not solving my great problem.
Right.
So it was actually really interesting experience for me.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's exactly the experience you're supposed to have. And this is the first time you're doing this. That is the biggest problem that prevents founders from developing solutions that actually solve problems. Because a lot of times people start with the solution side first. Like, hey, I have this idea. If I had a light bulb that does X, Y, Z, everybody would buy it. And then you go start building it because that's what your vertical is. You understand that space, you're technical. Or you're a sales guy and say, hey, if I had this way to sell to people, I'd be able to sell any product. And then they go try to build that solution side, and they don't really think about the problem side. So what this whole thing is supposed to do is really turn that on its head, completely 180 degrees. Start with the customer, get deep into their problems. Because the biggest thing as a business owner or a product manager is that you have to be able to solve problems, any problems that actually get to a value that is valuable to the customer, right? If you're not doing that, you're not doing your job, right? You're building something that's you're gonna have fun building it, but it's not solving a problem for the customer, right? So that's the first piece here. Now, the second piece is we're gonna have, I'm sorry to have to ask you to do this, but if you can switch places, and if everybody can just go musical chairs and rotate one, just one of you, both of you don't need to move, just one of you from each table, move to the next table, please. All right, so just like previously, we're gonna start the 5-minute timer, and remember what we said, rinse and repeat, right? So we're gonna do this again, and we're gonna have a different person to talk to, right? So whenever you're ready, your time starts now. All right, so that's the end of our exercise, and it's time for a little bit of a retrospective, and thank you for sharing the last time. I'd love for someone else to share this time is, really what is the extra gap that you had between what you had with your first interview, because we just talked about the gap between your initial thoughts and the first interview, right? Now, if someone can just chime in a little bit and share what they felt was the gap between their first interview and their second interview. Was that a surprise? Was that easier to do? Was there more learnings? Anybody want to chime in? Go ahead.
Easier to do, more learning, more probing question follow-up.
That's awesome. Yeah, you definitely get better with this thing the more you practice it. Did you learn something different though? Was the customer's feedback the first time you talked to them versus the customer's feedback the second time you talked to them? Did they have completely different pain points, or were they in the same ballpark? Completely different pain points. Okay, great. So, gotcha. That's good. So, go ahead. You wanted to add something, sir?
Oh, it's very, very different. In my career, I've applied as much or more
Yeah. Okay.
Doug was like 4 times a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're at like 4 days a week.
Right. That's absolutely true. That's where you start to tease out the customer segments, right? I mean, on the surface of it, if you look at it, we're all here in a conference. We have a lot of things probably. We're engaged in small business. Seems like we're one customer segment, right? Small business leaders. It's in the name, SBL Conference. But within that segment, if you break it down, we're starting to see how much difference there is within that one segment. And that's the first part of it, is really looking at, as I mentioned, the customer segments, the problems for the customer segments, and the solutions for the customer segments. Those are the three things you want to see in your head. And the first part you just did was identify different customer segments. And then for each segment, you're going to have different problems. And then which is the customer segment that cares enough about that problem that they will actually pay you money for the solution you have in mind, is where we get to eventually. And the structured way of this conversation, I mean, how many have had this kind of conversation that we just had with their actual customer? Or something similar? In the ballpark, right? Okay, one person who's tried that. Aha! I have strong opinions about surveys. No, that's great. It's good that you're doing surveys, because that is a feedback loop and it is valid. But for what we're trying to do, so survey is what we would put as a quantitative step, because you're actually putting numbers down, which option did they pick, how many people selected option C. That's the kind of quantitative measures. What we did here is qualitative. We're trying to be open-ended. We're trying to explore the area and really identify higher value things than what you came into the room with. That's your objective with this conversation, right? That's fantastic. So, last question on the list. If you had $5 million, now that you've had these conversations, are there things you could build that would actually solve problems for real people, right? That's for you to take away. Think about that a little bit. And then, but the whole exercise that we did, this was just the first step of the lean startup methodology or innovation methodology. And like I said, we can connect you to a lot of resources. And I don't have time to cover our background here, but you can see case studies for Dropbox, Intuit, Kiva. I personally have worked with a top 5 international university where we were able to apply these principles and see massive changes in how they're doing things in terms of how they propose features, how they add new products, simplifying it and really making minimum viable products first. And then what do VCs want? So let's take a quick 5 seconds here. If VCs are supposed to invest in you, they're looking for what is your annual recurring revenue, what is your long-term value per customer, and what is your cost of acquisition per customer. So if you can find out those customer segments that are willing to pay for your solution, and they're going to stick around long enough, then VCs will invest. It's as simple as that. So identifying that key problem statement is the first step, and then from there, having incremental build out of the solution is where you want to go. There's a bunch of resources in my slide decks that you can further explore, strategizer.com, Board of Innovation. All of this is available for a free download if you go to the SBL conference and download my slides. That is all I had for you today. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.